Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at the same time. Today, we've got pitch decks lined up. That's what we're going to be doing today. Every Tuesday, we're lining up pitch decks. We're going to do a deep dive. I have here with me my buddy and wonderful contributor, co-host of this happy hour that we're going to be spending here, Will. He is a nine-time founder, and you've got 6 exits under your belt.
Only five
exits. We're good. You've worked and you've raised over $1 billion for founders.
Helping other companies, startups. Yeah.
Oh man, that's absolutely crazy. So that's a 10xer from me. But Will, welcome to the show.
Ed, what I love about what you're doing at Startups.com with your chief strategy officer role is, number one, you've become the super advisor to like hundreds and what's now thousands of startups. When we talk about these pitch decks, I like the fact that you've been on both sides of the table. So you've been a GP at a firm, so you've seen what it's like to see those decks in the wild. And then you've also been on the startup side as a founder yourself. So you've seen what it's like to have to go up in front of those investors.
I have my wrinkles on the inside. Also, it's great having you here, Will, because you're known around the parts as a pitch deck aficionado, pitch deck wizard. You're known as a pitch deck doctor. Yeah. So it allows us to go back and forth and to jump in on these pitch decks, especially with our members. And I just want to give a shout out to all our members. I see you joining us in the waiting room. Thank you so much for all your support. Everybody else watching this on the YouTubes, do the YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe. And I just want to invite you at any point in time, if you have a question, anything that we say sparks some curiosities, or you want to talk about what you've got going on with your decks, use the Q&A box or the chat to ask questions. We're going to prioritize that. We've got Jen, another co-host. She's lurking in the background there, making sure that we catch all your questions. We prioritize that. But even before we get right to pitch decks, I promise you that we are going to get there pretty quick. I just want to give another shout out because this show is brought to you by us. And this podcast, Startup Therapy, is the reason that I'm here. It is the Startup Therapy podcast, and it is something that I highly encourage everybody to check out. It is hosted by Will himself and Ryan, and it is a no BS look at startup life. All the topics, check this out, that normally we don't talk about. Who's working for who? Let's get back to our why, how we secretly lose control of our startups. We lift the veil and just take it right face first. We head right in there, and you can have these conversations, and it's great. And I really appreciated the fact that, Will, you and Ryan are willing to have those conversations and to create that environment that we can come together and talk all day. And that's what we're all about.
You bet. I mean, it's just, the brutal honesty about what the startup journey actually is versus what it's supposed to be. What we say is the stuff they don't put in the brochure. And I think a lot of people get that, right? They're like, oh, wait, this was supposed to be one thing and it's totally different. But we try to break that down. And we're very specific about what parts are bullshit. It's kind of fun.
I like to say this is part of the program that you didn't pay for, which I totally appreciate. We're going to lift the hood, go off Broadway, if you will. Will, how about we jump into some pitch decks?
Let's get at it.
Okay, so I've got one lined up. This is a member here at Startups.com, Reshape. And what we're going to do, just to start it off here for everybody who's going to be watching this, Will, we so appreciate the courage it takes to do a pitch deck, send it to us, and kind of have us talk about it here and record it so everybody else can learn.
Yep. And what's funny, Ed, is a lot of the folks that send us the deck, what they tell about us later is, it's so hard watching you guys tear apart my deck and not being able to respond because you're like, well, I don't understand why this doesn't. I just want to tell you why this doesn't work or why you don't understand it or why this should be fixed. But that's the point. The point is the deck has to live on its own. The deck has to be in a place where without you get to see firsthand how it's actually digested. So, a lot of the folks that are on the show today, folks that will listen in the future, this is how people respond to your deck. When you're wondering, you don't have to. This is exactly what it looks like.
And once again, if you want your pitch deck to be reviewed, you are literally going to get $1 million worth of consulting in an hour. That's what we're all about. Use the Q&A box, chat, ask questions if you want. If you want your deck reviewed, you can send it to us here, advisor@startups.com, or let us know. Make sure Jen gets your information and sets this up for you. In the meantime, let's take a look. We've got this one here, Reshape, and been working with this founder for quite a bit now, and it's been really great. What I really love about this is it's something near and dear to my heart because I'm all about fat loss and strength training right now. So right away on the cover, and we're going to try and whip through this and really get to the end of the deck. Usually we focus more on problem, solution, and kind of the main slides, but today we're going to try and go through as much of the deck as possible for all of you out there to learn. But let's look at the cover. AI-powered mobile app for fat loss and strength training. I like it. Straightforward. Will, what do you think?
I got to say, it's same thing. Part of the reason when we looked at this deck initially, I was like, hey, let's get to the meat of the deck a little bit further in the deck, is because the first few slides are actually pretty good. So this is a great intro slide. It's exactly what it does. It's right on point.
Right. It doesn't have any super hype marketing jargon, any hyperbolic statements. We know what we're getting into. That's what I like about this. Next problem. There's a 5 billion fat loss and strength training app market where more than half the people struggle because of inconvenient, incomplete, impersonal, and expensive solutions.
You know what surprised me, Ed? It's only 5 billion. I mean, wouldn't you think of anything fat loss training to be like 500 billion? I'm always wondering when we get to the part where we start looking at market size and kind of how they're sizing the market, that it's only 5 billion. And I'm not being critical. 5 billion isn't bad. I'm just saying this has a huge TAM to it.
I'm thinking that he's probably focusing on, this founder, the strength and training app market. Just apps alone. Does that stand up for you enough?
This is one of the rare times where I actually feel like it might be too specific, right? Because in my mind, spending money toward losing weight, gaining strength, etc., is a pocketbook that could go in a lot of places. And I don't think I specifically have an app budget if I'm trying to do these things. So I thought that was interesting. However, I love the fact that he highlighted inconvenient, incomplete, impersonal, expensive. It's a lot to remember, but you told me exactly what I should be focused on. So the structure here is fantastic.
Right. I say, if you can follow the rule of threes, that's always ideal. Yeah. But at the same time, let's take a look and let's go to the next one and see if the two connect together, problem and solution. Once again, just a little bit of hygiene here. This whole thing of just saying problem right in the top left here, and then the rest in your Stark headline, that's always ideal. We preach that constantly.
Yep. Absolutely.
Next, the solution. All right, so that slide gets a little more information. What if AI could be better than a remote personal trainer? We're making it just that. Reshapes AI-powered mobile app, provides users with personalized coaching, advanced AI tools. It's fast, affordable, and effective.
Too many messages. The question isn't what if AI could be better than a remote personal trainer, because we're assuming that, once again, AI is this catch-all magic wand that, can do and say everything. And no one was saying that the problem was that AI couldn't be better than a remote personal trainer. In other words, we're responding to a problem we didn't set up in the problem statement, and that's a big no-no.
So let's take this out, right? Yeah. I think we just eliminate that. Yep. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so we provide personalized coaching, but it's going to be hard for me to say, yeah, but so does a trainer. That's literally what they do. So in other words, I don't see the contrast as heavily as they're probably thinking it. The advanced AI tools to track nutrition, get continuous analysis, and a lot more. Guess what? I have a Fitbit, does all of that. Now, you're probably saying, oh, but hold on, your Fitbit doesn't do that because what you really want is X, Y, and Z. Awesome. Talk about X, Y, and Z. When you said there are advanced AI tools to track nutrition, et cetera, you gave me nothing. You told me about every single fitness app ever. When you said personalized coaching, you gave me nothing. You talked about every personal coach ever. That's the whole reason you get a personal coach. So we got to take that a level deeper. We got to take it just a bit further and say, here's why this is the problem. Why these current systems don't work well, and contrast that to specifically what we do. That's badass. What do you think, Ed?
Let me go back here because I know where you're going. We said here, inconvenient, incomplete, impersonal, and expensive. So now we go into the next thing, and we always say your solution has to address the problem literally point by point. So if you're saying inconvenient, incomplete, impersonal, and expensive, so now we have to address all that, but I lose the message here. I like what you said. We're not differentiated enough. I want to know how AI makes this fast, affordable, and effective. And really, that's sort of the meat down here that we're talking about, where you get a little more differentiation.
You bet. So I would argue that the top half of this slide actually doesn't say anything. Doesn't provide any unique value or information. And I also think you made it harder on yourself in the problem slide when you brought up 4 different problems. Yeah. Because one, I guarantee you, Ed, do you remember what those 4 problems are?
Incomplete. That's all I remember now.
Right, exactly. and again, I don't think people understand how hard it is to remember this stuff, right? And if your stuff can't be remembered, then it didn't exist. Everything you just said on that problem slide. Now, these are 2 guys who do this for a living that can't remember what you wrote on that previous slide, and that was 8 seconds ago, right? This is how hard this is.
Let me take a little shot at this and get your feedback. For me, I think that if I looked at this inconvenient and expensive, to me, those don't really move the needle because apps are going to be convenient. Like, I don't know how much more you can make it convenient and expensive. I'm like, apps, they're not that expensive. I have used apps before. So if I'm going to focus and I say, if there's a differentiator here, it's going to be incomplete. And that's a curiosity to me. And impersonal, I think AI is going to that. It's not as personal enough or as much as it could be because I've experienced these apps. So if we focus on incomplete and impersonal, let's take a look. And then we go here. And if you said something in this slide where now it's more complete, here's why it's more complete. So the solution is going to be complete and more personal, then I think we've got the foundation for a winning solution.
You bet. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, let me just clear this slide up here. All right, so Mr. Founder, I look forward to, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention his name, but he knows who he is. I'm going to have a chat with him. All right, market size, we got the global market opportunity, fat loss, and strength training app is $5 billion. So that's, I guess, what we confirmed. They're spending that. With US and Canada contribute $4 billion to it. Now that's extraneous information. Growth potential, market expected to grow. So we got the typical, let's do a top-down analysis and show some growth numbers. And then initial target market, which is what we always like to see, is we start targeting the $2.5 million market with 25 to 45-year-old professionals in US and Canada, where the demand is sustainable, personalized weight loss solutions is the highest.
There's two ways you can look at this. You can look at it and say, hey, that's a pretty good market size slide. And it's not terribly broken. I look at it and say there's 50 things wrong with this slide. Right now, not because I want to be critical, just because I see a million pitch decks. So I just, my mind is attuned to these things. I'll give you one I touched on earlier. I actually believe the market's way bigger than this. I think when we say that it's all about fat loss and strength training apps, if that market alone is 5 billion, then the market for personal training, the market for more bespoke conditioning has to be bigger than that. Right. So my first thought is we probably artificially limited it, which is, let's face it, Ed, usually what we don't see. Usually we're on the other end of this.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Where it's like you made it $50 trillion. We're like, okay, that's not exactly it. But the tool that we always use, and for folks listening to this for the first time, here's what you do. When you're looking at your market size, you always check it by this metric. You always say, if everyone only bought my application or my product to solve this problem, how much money would I make? Again, if everyone only bought my product to solve this problem, how much money would we make? Now, what that means is you can't make more money than if everybody bought your product, right? So that is the maximum your market could be. So on this particular case where we'd say, well, hey, this market would be everybody that bought a fat loss and strength training app bought this app. But what you'd be missing is how many people don't have an app that still has to solve this problem.
Okay, but I want to push this just a little further because, Will, something that you always say that really gets me thinking, and I admit, I don't necessarily think this, but last time you said we want to figure out an initial target market that we have like an unfair advantage with.
Absolutely.
So let's break this down just in this scenario and talk about it without being distracted by the slide. For example, if the AI is trained for professionals or trained for something specific or a specific type of demographic, then you want to focus on that. And I always say your focus market should be something that you have access to, is better built for your business model or something that makes sense to an investor as a story. For me, Will, in this, I don't think that saying, okay, now we're just going to target Canada and the US, I don't really think that pushes it enough to say, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense for the investor.
Yeah, I was that was the second part of it. I was thinking we're saying US and Canada where the demand is for sustainable personalized weight loss is the highest. Now, I don't really think that means much. First off, 25 to 45 is a massive demographic, and you haven't subdivided that by profession, by anything, right? There's a million ways to kind of to cut that. But to your point, Ed, I want to see why that group is going to go more nutty for your product than any other group we could have gone after. Why are those the people that stand for 2 days outside the Apple store to get the latest Apple phone, right? Like why, what is it about those people? That's who you're going after first. Because if you can't make it work for them, you're not gonna make it work at all.
Let me give you a little inside baseball. And Will, I want you to riff off of this because I've been working with this founder. And this is the best part of Startups.com, everybody. We really get into your business. Like we get right into your grill and we learn about the business. So that gives me the opportunity to have these types of conversations where we can wrestle because I have this information. Will, in this particular case, I really pushed the founder in the beginning. I said, why can't it just be fat loss, or why can't we just compete with Jenny Craig or whatever apps out there? And he said something really interesting to me. He said, the gap in the market is fat loss combined with muscle gain. And that is something that people don't, it's either fat loss or it's muscle gain, but there's a specific science that has to do with fat loss and muscle gain. Yep. And he said it to me verbally, and I don't see this in the pitch deck. So I'm thinking, let me pitch this to you, Will. Let's put you on that side of the table.
All right.
If I said, listen, all these apps make all this money, let's say the entire fat loss and muscle gain app market is, say, let's say 15 billion. Okay.
Sure.
And then I say, but there is this segment of the market that want to do fat loss and muscle gain at the same time, because I know, because I've been through it. There's like bulking up and then cutting down and all those things. Yep. And our stuff is focused on solving that problem better than anybody else. And that represents, let's say, 50 million users who will pay us, whatever, $10 each. And so we're going to make $500 million a year. How would that resonate with you?
I would like that more, because I think the combo is what makes it special. Years ago, like long in the mid 2000s, I met the founder of P90X.
Right? Oh, okay.
A fascinating guy, and had been in various businesses and always a hustle of some sort, very much an LA character. And he was saying, look, at the end of the day, people want to be told exactly what the program is. Like, that is the product. The product is specificity. They want to know that if you do this, in this, in this, you get to an outcome. So we have to map that into this, right? We have to say, we do 3 things extraordinarily well, and our audience is dying for this, right? We do strength training specifically like this, and this is exactly what they want. We do diet and fat loss very differently. We do it exactly like this, and it's exactly what people want. Again, back to the founder of P90X, which was wildly popular at the time. He says they want a very specific prescription. And what's funny? He didn't say this, but I kind of thought this, and they don't even care what it is, right? Whether it's South Beach diet, whether it's Atkins, they don't really care what the ultimate program is, but they have to have a program. And I think that absolutely applies here.
Now, let me flip it on the other side. And this is just for everybody else who's watching this. Will, I remember this is a story that you told me, and I think it's easy to expand upon, and it's worthwhile, because if you can show the investor, hey, there's a market that exists and they didn't know about it, and they're like, holy crap, you mean there's that many millions of people?
Exactly.
I think about your story. Well, tell this story to everybody in terms of when you had that thing where people couldn't have credit cards and why don't they just go get loans? And that was that whole thing where you were financing Xboxes, and the investors were blown away that there was a market they didn't even know. That's what I want to relate to this.
Yeah. Okay. So way back in the mid 2000s, actually almost exactly the same year, I had started a company called Affordit.com, which does not exist anymore. But it was Affirm and Afterpay 10 years before Affirm and Afterpay, right? So we were way ahead of the market. So when I was going out pitching it, and this idea that I wanted to create an e-commerce product where people could buy stuff using weekly payments. And I pitched it to all of the investors and all the Sand Hill Road, Silicon Valley VCs. And they looked at me like I had 2 heads. They were like, wait, hold on. You're saying someone's going to want to buy an Xbox that would normally just be $400, but they're going to want to do it in payments? Like, why would anybody do that? Like, why not just put it on your Amex Black Card, right? I mean, you got to remember the audience we're talking to. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, right? Like, I grew up poor. So like for me, I didn't think twice about, of course, something that's $400 is a meaningful purchase and a lot of people can't pay for it. But they thought it was ridiculous. I had to explain to them. I changed my whole deck. I had to explain to them that poor people existed, right? Not even like that poor of people, right? Like their heads were so far from reality. It was unbelievable. I went from here's what could change e-commerce to, there are people that make less than $50,000 in the world, right? Like, it's unbelievable. Didn't see that coming.
That's the lesson I want to send back to this founder here. Just like you heard it. And Will, how much money did you end up raising from that? Based on that insight alone, that huge market alone.
Oh, I mean, that was a pre-seed round. We were raising over $1 million. But here's what's funny. When we launched that business, we started selling Xboxes for $19 a week. We sold $500,000 worth of Xboxes in 4 weeks. To give you an idea of like where that model was, and it was maybe 9 seconds before the financial crisis, before Lehman melted down, and the entire funding market went ice cold overnight. I've never seen anything like it. Needless to say, that's why you're buying from Affirm and not Affordit.
Yes, but that market was proven. You're just ahead of your time.
Yeah,
but
sometimes
the amount of money that you're able to sell, the traction, and raise relatively quickly. That's the same thing that I just want to share with this founder. If you can go back to your thesis and prove to the investor that there's this robust market and there's a gap of weight loss as well as strength training together, that's a number that investors will want to see. I think that's a competitive advantage in this.
You bet. All right, let's keep going.
All right, here's how it works. I'm not going to get into this. How it works is more of a case study. So Kate wants to lose 30 pounds of fat with her busy life, and then it goes through these steps: onboarding, goal setting, super easy data tracking, etc.
No one will ever digest or remember any of this.
Yes.
You get 3 steps. If you want to get crazy, you get a 4th. You want to make them linear if possible. So step 1, who's our friend Kate? Kate's trying to have this outcome. Step 2 is she uses the app to get this function. In step 3 is, and here's why she was successful doing it. That's it. Now, again, if you need a step 4, not the end of the world, but the tighter you can keep this, the easier it is to remember. No one will ever remember this slide. And not because it's a bad slide or it's not telling, because it's not memorable. Keep it simple, keep it linear.
Let's push it a little bit, because we departed from what made the decks good so far, and that is, let's get a big stark headline right here that says what you need to say very clearly, what makes you separate, different, apart, what customers want to see, what investors need to know. Let's figure out in the headline. And then, like you said, 1, 2, 3, maybe a 4th, and talk about those steps. Now, here's what I'd like to see, Will. I want to see something different than tracks meals with images and voice, etc. Like tracks meals, okay.
That's an instruction manual.
Yeah, right. But if it says, now this is also inside information. I know it's got a real cool thing where you can take pictures of your food and I'll analyze it for you and all that stuff. So say that. Takes a picture of your food and then it starts tracking it. So get rid of all the extraneous instruction manual stuff that we take for granted and get into the special sauce. Tell us what's different about this.
You bet.
All right, simplify. I like the way that you broke that down. Let's move to the next slide. Traction. This gets me excited. Not the slide, but the traction gets me excited. And that's the reason I wanted to bring this pitch deck, because we've already got 1,100 users, and I love 9,000 pounds lost, and then the app is live. Yeah, it's awesome. The fact that they're tracking that's totally cool. And then we've got these user metrics, and it's just, this whole slide, I get lost. I get excited, then I get lost. We'll break it down. How can we change this?
Okay, so there's 3 things that I want to see on a traction slide, and I just want to focus on these 3 things. I want to know what's the state of the product, which we've done here, but I want to see in this order. The first thing I want to see is what's the state of the project. App is live on iOS and Android, and it's being rated 5.5, 4.9 out of 5. So the first thing I want to see is state of product. Second thing I want to see is customer validation. I've got 1,100 people using it. I've got 300,000 meals tracked. Be careful when we're talking about the traction or the growth or the validation. Focus on numbers that everyone can understand. I think 1,100 people that have lost 9,000 pounds is cool. Now, I can't really quantify what 9,000 pounds really means. It just sounds like a lot. It's a cool stat. But let's go into the usage metrics. And we're talking about total meals tracked, weekly active users, daily active users. No one's going to be able to remember or parse that detailed of information. So all we want is a quick flyby. What's the most important customer validation stat we have, and move on? What do you think, Ed?
I think that if we just broke this down into users, right? So state of the app and users, and I would like to see, and I was looking at some really great traction slides of successful decks, and the common thing in traction slides is they had, this big headline, which I like because it attracts the investor, but then they had these growth graphs that went like this, and week over week or month over month. And so if you can get to number of users, so we've got the 1,100 people and active user, or whatever you want to do, and you show this week over week, then I think you don't need the rest of this, like meta ads. We've added the go-to-market slide, and you just don't need any of that in this. If you just had this section here, and I'm totally muddying up the slide here, but you had this section right here, that to me is enough for traction, because this alone is pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, okay, so I want to see the state of the product. I want to see the customer validation, which could be 1,100 people, could be 300,000 meals tracked. And then I want to see growth. I want to see something over something. I want to see month over month, year over year. It's almost always going to be week over week or month over month. But show me that this train is leaving the station. Show me that I'm about to miss this opportunity. That third wheel, the part where we're talking about growth, it's got to be mind-blowing. All the other stuff can go. If you hit on those 3 markers on product, growth, and validation, you got me. And I just need one of your finest points in each category.
Well, let's talk about this for a moment. I think focusing on this, we haven't had this extensive conversation yet. I want to expand on your last point. Train, growth, week over week, month over month. Why? Because a lot of founders, they say, oh, I have 300,000 users, right? And they give you this monolithic number. Why is a week over week or month over month growth important specifically in startups?
Because all investing happens on momentum. All investing happens on momentum. When you watch companies that are almost not even around anymore, what was the scooter company, Bird? Travis at Bird, different Travis, had so much momentum in that raise. They hit a $2 billion valuation in like 18 months. Now, they couldn't have possibly done anything meaningful in that 18 months substantive to make a business worth that much, but the perception of how fast it was growing, of how fast things were moving, is what drove that valuation. That valuation was 100% driven by FOMO, fear of missing out. Every investor felt that was going to be the next Uber. And ironically, this Travis came from Uber and from Lyft. And that's the story he told. He said, you missed on Uber and Lyft, or maybe you hit and you want to hit it again, right? This is your opportunity to do it again. And he sold that FOMO and he crushed with that. And now the business later would go on to be fairly insolvent because he also launched it in the heart of COVID, but whatever.
And well, that's going to reveal your customer acquisition. And this is a topic that I think maybe it's worth exploring just a little more. When you are doing a startup, let's look at two halves of the equation. One is development, and one is distribution. So can you build a product? Does the product actually work? Do people like it? Does it do what you say it's going to do? Unique value proposition. But you can have the best mousetrap in the world, and if it doesn't sell and it doesn't grow at the rate that investors need to see, well, then you're cooked. You're not going to get the investment. And so a lot of second-time founders, this is really fascinating. And, we don't have a lot of them here at Startups.com, but you and I both know when you do your second startup, you focus way more on distribution than you do on development.
Yep. Right? Yep. You're like, yeah, we can build anything. Let's actually see if anybody buys it. Like, that's what we care about.
And so if you can show week over week growth, now you've got that trifecta: state of the product, you got the proof, but you've also got the growth, because now as an investor, I can extrapolate. When I see a week over week growth graph and I get into numbers, then I can say, all right, all I have to do is pour gasoline on this fire. And for every dollar that I put in, I should expect this. And in 9 months' time or 1 year's time, we are going parabolic, or we got that hockey stick growth.
Right. I agree. And so I think for the most part, that traction slide has to convince me as the investor that this thing is somewhat proven. Again, you're in the early stages, they get that. But more importantly, it's moving. That's what traction is all about. How's this thing moving?
And there's potential here because I know he's growing. And we get so many founders that come and they don't have any initial traction, which is fine. But now we've got traction. We just want to present it in a way that investors bite off on.
You bet. All right, let's see what else we got.
Okay, so now we got this really interesting slide here. And this is actually the founder. And I love the fact he solved his own problem. And dang, he looks good. Like, this just gets me super excited.
You know what? I want more pitch decks where I can show my abs off in the pitch deck, because like I just don't have enough opportunities. Of course, I'd be the picture on the left, so maybe not. I do love it. I would love to see someone that's not him with those results. I love when people eat their own dog food. I love that fact. But the first thing that comes to mind is, well, damn, of course he did it because it's his app. He's going to be more focused on getting the result. So I would love to say I used it, and here's two other before and afters of other people. Back to P90 guy. All he said to me is like, Will, all that matters is that people see before and after. They just have to see before and after. They have to have a very specific script, and they have to see the before and after. That's what gets them to buy.
If you had a traction slide and you just showed like, here's number of users and here are all the photos that they sent us, and you just showed a bunch of before and after, like, that would crush it.
I agree.
That's my comment. I like the way that you explain it, Will, because you give me justification. I like these slides when founders eat their own dog food in live presentations to create an exciting story and just say, this was me and I was unhealthy. And I said, I'm not able to lose weight and gain muscle at the same time. I struggled with all these apps. Like, it's a great story slide if you're presenting live. To me, I wouldn't include this in a screener introductory deck that I would send out.
It does lose something without the founder's story behind it. When I was saying that company afforded it, the reason I would open it up just saying like, hey, this is where I came from. This is the world that I lived in. And it was a pretty powerful story because it had to do with my relationship with my brother and some things we went through together that kind of like inspired this. But I couldn't tell that in a blank slide without me. Right?
Totally.
That's it. Yeah.
Let me give you another example. I've talked about this before, but when I was doing a emotional intelligence and social emotional learning startup, we had this neuro gamification thing. I put in a slide of my son because I use this, and he hated school, and just it was tough because of the social component to it. His SEL wasn't fully developed. So I had a picture of him on the first day of school, and he looked like I was sending him to like a torture death camp, right? And then I showed a report card after and him smiling, the next year.
Makes a huge difference.
But I only put that in the live presentation. When it's on stage, everybody loves it.
You have to deliver it.
Exactly. And I actually had an investor totally said I'm in based on that slide alone because he had the same experience, which was fantastic. So never count that out. But what Will and I were talking about is we always say that you're not going to be there over their shoulder narrating it. So slides like this, not necessary when you're sending out a deck.
All right, let's keep going.
Founding team. All right. Good Canadian kid. That's the reason I'm
it's so
bullish.
Funny, Ed? I was going to say this. I was going to say, if you would go back to the market size slide.
Right here. Yep.
The only people that ever reference US and Canada in their market size are Canadians, right? I just and I respect why they do it. Don't get me wrong. But as soon as I saw the US and Canada, I was like, he's Canadian. 10 out of 10 times, right? That'll come up. And the funny thing is, I think, from the US standpoint where I'm based, we tend to sleep on Canada. Right. In other words, we tend to, you see most people just put the US market size. And I'm like, how could you overlook Canada? Right. And so regardless, I think it's hilarious. So let's go back to your Canadian.
All right. First. Here we go. So we got the founder and 4 years. He's just got his stuff and then gave his own personal story right there. And then we've got Indian co-founder and CTO, and then we got information down there.
This is a lot to digest. Same school, same IIT, same mission. Doesn't draw a lot. I'm going to assume you guys are co-founders for just that reason. That's kind of a given. What I want to do here, though, I want to distill this slide a bit because the team slide is often one of the most underutilized slides. Here's what it tends to be. Here's where it tends to go off the rails. And I'd love to see if you've seen the same trend. The first problem that I see with the team slide is everyone wants to turn it into a yearbook or a company directory. They want to list every single person at the company without realizing no one cares, right? At some point, if someone wants to know every person that works at your company, they'll ask, and I guarantee they'll never ask. What they want to know is who are the most important people, which is difficult because then everybody feels like an a-hole when they're like, oh, I guess we can't put our social media manager on here because they're not as important. But you got to understand why this slide is here. It's not an inventory of your staff. No one is that vested in what your company makeup is.
Okay, hang on. The other version of this that I see is the tomb of information. It's chiseled in granite, something you'd see on a plaque dedicating a building. You got a picture of, someone sitting there, holding a pipe and this massive wall of text bio. And that's the precise opposite, but that does not work either.
Correct. And so actually it's similar. Ed, when you and I opened up this episode, I talked a little bit about you. You talked a little about me. It's just something we think to do. But you didn't talk about everything I've done, and I don't talk about everything you've done. What we did was we only talked, I think just instinctively, we just talked about the things that we thought our audience would find most important. You talked about me having pitch deck expertise and having helped people raise over $1 billion, right?
Yes.
Why? Because that specific part of my resume, I've done 900 other things. None of it's relevant to this conversation.
Totally relevant. Yeah.
Right. And so what's important about this slide isn't how much you can pack on it. It's how you can only put the most important parts. So let's go back to the slide. I would look at that and I would say to the founders, each of you gets 2 things you're allowed to say about yourself. What are the 2 most important things? Now, you may come back and say, yeah, but there's this and this, and I won't knock that. But what I'll say is, but don't you want to make sure that if nothing else, everyone knows that you did the first and second thing, right? So for example, going back to my bio for a second, I've done 9 startups and have 5 exits. As a startup founder, if you're wondering what my qualifications are, I probably don't have another qualification that's more salient. I've been doing this for 31 years. That's fairly salient, right? Now, you may want to look at the size of some of my outcomes. That could be salient. But once you've gotten that, right? If I were to say, look, I've had 9 companies, 5 exits, and my startups have done billions of dollars in sales, right? You'd probably go, oh, okay, we're good. Now, if I drone on about 15 other details about myself, that I like long walks on the beach and I'm a father and
yeah,
who cares? Right?
Yeah.
You were sold on the first 2 points. The moment we keep layering on less important points, all we're doing is diluting the most important points. Very important throughout the deck.
Yeah, and the only way that I push that a little bit is, let's say you exited and one of your startups was in cloud storage and this next venture is in cloud storage, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
And that just gets more detailed, but I'm going to tell you, Will, one of the things, I just want to appreciate this team. This is the reason I'm bullish, not just a Canadian thing, all right? I do support Canada as much as I possibly can, but we support every international, we just equal opportunity, everybody gets support. The two founders, and Will, this doesn't always happen, especially here at Startups.com. The two founders are technical, and they can build the product. And because of that, I think this is a great team. But I'm going to point this out. I'm most interested in what happened here. These two lines here, I want to see those broken down, because you're telling me you got several years. How many years? And you've actually worked in robotics, AI, computer vision, which is part of your app, taking pictures of food using AI. Well, give me information on these two. Everything else, I do not care. Same school, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about this. If you just broke these 2 points out, I would be pretty darn satisfied with this slide.
There's a couple things we get to do here. The first thing we always want to do, and these are just kind of like working down the system. First thing we always want to do is say, have you worked at a company or worked with a client that's a big name recognizable logo? Big name recognizable logos are everything, right? So you want to look at, who have I worked for? Who have I worked with that I can steal? And I mean in a good way, steal some of their brand credibility.
Yes.
Right. Let's go back to that slide for a second. I saw some names I recognized there. I saw Capgemini, right? I'm stealing that logo. Capgemini's on there, right? That shows that a qualified, competent company at a very high level has chosen you to work there, right? And maybe you did something great. I saw Tata Communications, and I don't know a lot about Tata, but enough that I recognize that name, right? So if it's the one I think it is, and it might be a different version, that's a huge company, right? So a big logo. Now, here's the other thing I thought was interesting. B-Tech, IIT, BHU. What the hell does that mean?
I have no idea.
Okay, so when I say that, I'm sure those are great credentials. But when I say that, these guys know the value of those credentials. They're assuming their audience somehow has the same perspective and worldview. Now, IIT might be the MIT of India, right?
Okay.
Maybe if I know that, that would be amazing. Now, picture this. Picture, Ed, you and I went to MIT, and now we're pitching this in some other part of the world, and they have no idea what MIT is.
Exactly.
Right? Holy cow, we're like the 0.0001% of students that could get into that school, which connotes amazing amount of skill and intellectual capacity. And the fact that we'd go to present it, and the audience wouldn't even know what it is, right, would be mind-blowing. So in this case, I'm not taking any chances, right? Like, if IIT is the MIT of India, I want to make sure that folks know that. And I want to be recognizing that if I'm coming to the US or Canada to represent this and it's not as well known, I might have to just give a little bit of context.
And I think that founders, and I get it. I totally get it, Will. Being someone who never I went to 3 post-secondary educational institutions. I never graduated from one of them. So I get it. Total respect for someone who can finish a degree, get that diploma, walk along with your gown and all those things. But I think founders overestimate their education in terms of, okay, I got all these degrees and I did all this stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, you went to Harvard. Okay, yeah, but what exactly did you do beyond that? That's going to speak so much more, because you can't rely on education alone. Because, Will, you and I both know that there are so many startups that are done by people who dropped out of school, who are thinking outside the box. Like, really, an MBA, those types of credentials don't really move the needle a lot when it comes to startups.
I'm going to take it a step further. Number one, neither of us graduated college, right? I was talking to my kids this weekend, and my kids were like, Dad, where'd you graduate college? Because we were on campus at Ohio State for a game. And I was like, I didn't graduate anywhere. So it's like, your dad was busy building companies, not reading about it. But what I would say is, and this is just, this frustrates a lot of people when I say this, no one cares where you went to school unless it was extraordinary.
Yeah.
Something you studied was extraordinary, or the school you got into and maybe the program there was extraordinary. If you just went to college, it doesn't make a lick of difference. Everybody's gone to college. And I don't mean that in an elitist way. I'm saying that just think of the bar of who you're competing against. You're competing against some of the most driven, ambitious, smartest people on the planet. Saying you went to college buys you nothing. Saying that you went to Harvard, and not like up on Harvard, buys you more, right? Because that says among all these idiots that went to college, mine was kind of the best, right? Or if you're like, my thesis or my focus in college was on specifically this category, I am a highly specific domain expert, then hell yeah, put it in there.
Okay, one caveat though, because I just want to make sure that we're always teaching this, Will, and make it contextually relevant to the investor. I was in China, and I worked with the gal who wrote checks for Jack Ma, so his venture firm. Yeah. And she wrote a $30 million check to some founders, Chinese founders, and they all went to Princeton and then moved back to China. That meant so much to them because they got educated in North America and they brought it over. So if that's relevant, then great. So if you went to the Harvard of India and your startup is in India and you got a special insight, mention it. But listen to what Will said, everyone. Just understand from an investor perspective, we're not taking away from your education, but think about it. All right. Competition. We kind of beat up a competition slide before, but what are your comments here in terms of how do we fix this up?
Well, let's move that sentence at the bottom to the top.
Yes.
With the idea that if I can read the TLDR, the summary sentence at the top, and not have to read the rest of the slide, you win. I think there's this concept that everyone's going to parse every part of every slide. You don't want them to. You want them to just get the takeaway, the TLDR, the trailer to the movie, not the whole movie. Because if I can read this and I can say, okay, they create an unparalleled experience for users offering, okay, blah, blah, then that's good enough. Now, frankly, what we're missing here is this is what the customer wants. Competition slides are not about who the competitors are. It's why the customer can't get what they're looking for. So that summary sentence has to focus on that. Go ahead, Ed.
Let me jump in here and prove Will's point. Like what the customer wants, like customer needs. The problem is I have no idea what completeness is, right? Now, let me point out something that
establish it.
Good point. You always say, Will, which I think they did well, is you always say group the competitors. So I like the fact that we group nutrition apps, workout apps, etc. Okay, great. On the side here, what the customer wants. So what does completeness mean? Does it track all my nutrition? Well, put that here. You know, I know you've got this listed here, but put it here. Does it allow me to take pictures of my food? Does it allow me to etc. Put that there. And then you can get rid of all this text and just go into the X's and the check marks and, things like that. But this slide could be consolidated down. The raw materials are here. And it's organized partially the way that we like to see, but I'm going to challenge what goes along this side right here. And then I'm going to look at all the data inside and say, how can we simplify all this to make it so that the customer, I want it. This is the stuff that moves the needle for the customer.
You bet. And I want to look at this chart and go, man, you're right. The customer is looking for that. And holy cow, everyone else sucks.
Absolutely. I'm going to let you fix your camera, Will. And there you go. Okay, great. So let's take a look at this next slide here. We're getting to the end. The ask, okay? The ask is 500K, what we're hiring for and what we're going to achieve.
Let's talk about what this slide is actually about and what it's not about. Everyone thinks the ask slide is about how much money you're asking for. And of course, fundamentally, that's the easy part. But they also think it's about where we're going to spend the money. Now, while that's important, it's not as important as you think, because all of this maps back to one question as an investor I'm going to ask on this slide. What happens when all the money is spent? Where will we be at the end of this? Ed, when you were on the investing side, when you were a GP at a fund and you looked at this ask slide, how often did people communicate, here's what we'll be when you give us your money?
Oh, it's so rare. So rare. They just, this is one of the really bad habits that drove me absolutely crazy. And it's been stemmed a little bit, like the market's changing. But back in the day, Will, and you were part of this, it was all about, I'm just going to raise money until I have to raise money again. So it was all like, we're raising, $5 million for 18 months runway. And that's it. Like that's all was on the slide there. And I think you are taking for granted that one, you're going to raise again, which, Will, we know happens very little. And two, you make it look like, we're just raising money to raise money till we can raise money again.
Yep. It's not what we're raising money to spend it on. It's what we're going to get out of the money.
Yes.
It's the outcome that's the focus, not the spend. So what we want to focus on here most, let's go back to that slide. It's that part that we kind of buried the lead at the bottom there.
Yeah.
Which is we project reaching 10,000 paying customers with these funds within 12 to 18 months. I can always tell when people have followed our formula. So I was glad to see that.
Yeah.
But actually, that's the headline.
Yeah, totally.
We're raising $500,000. So we'll have 10,000 paying customers within 12 to 18 months.
Yes.
Boom. That's what I want to see, because what we're really trying to communicate in this slide is, hey, we're going to have to raise in another 12 to 18 months. And look how investors will be salivating when we have 10,000 paying customers when we raise more money.
Right on. And I've seen founders literally, this is where I get my equation from. I say, you're raising X dollars for Y milestone. What does that get me in Z time frame, right?
Yep.
And when founders do that, I know they've been thoughtful, and I will always challenge. And this is what I did. You want to know when it gets really hectic and crazy. So you get through like problem solution market, right? We're socializing, we're looking at all the numbers, and then we start having the money conversation. And my committee, my partners, me and the partners, we beat you up on your financials, right? And that's a sweat, right there.
Yep.
And but I've seen founders have this amazing slide. You're going to put in this amount of money. This is what it unlocks for us. And if all goes well, guess what? We're in a very, very good cash flow position. Now we just need more gasoline to pour on the fire. And investors, that's when FOMO really starts to set in.
You bet. I don't want to be the investor that missed this $500,000 check and wasn't on the other side of this when those founders are running around with 10,000 paying customers and there's people standing in line to invest in them. So that's why I'm getting in this deal now, not because they're spending 30% in marketing.
Let's summarize this then. So same principle. Let's get a headline going. So we want to say we're raising 500K to do this. Right. And really, that's what you need. Well, it's okay. Like, I don't mind. Normally, I don't mind if someone has really thought this through and tells me like a few percentage, this is what we're doing, et cetera. But all this stuff, I'm like, okay, I see it, but I kind of ignore it if I'm going to be truthful.
The reason you ignore it is because you've seen it 1,000 times. And here's the irony. It's always the same chart. Yeah. Right. Like at some later point, we'll talk about some of the details of that. But right now it's like, I get it. It's always 30% marketing, 50% in headcount, whatever. So let's move on. What do we got next, Ed?
That's the last. Oh, we got a financial slide. Okay. Let's beat this slide up just a little bit. I'm always so torn on financial slides, Will. And we've talked about this a lot. For me, if you're pre-revenue, I don't need to see a financial slide because it's always wrong. But this company is generating revenue. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, here's a couple things that I always want to see, which is why I like the layout of this, okay? Every business has a couple of critical dependencies or assumptions that more or less make or break the business, okay? Ed, if you and I were starting Uber for the first time, and I was our CFO, and I've been a startup CFO for 25 years, the first thing I would say, I was like, Ed, one of our critical assumptions that we have to set aside is the cost to the drivers, right? If we're going to charge somebody $30 for a ride, but we can't pay a driver less than $30 to drive someone there, it doesn't matter how the rest of our business is structured, right? It doesn't matter what our customer acquisition costs are. It doesn't matter what our operational costs are. No amount of cost savings or spending is going to change the fact that if we can't get our cost of goods sold, which in this case is a driver, less than what it costs, us to service customer, we're screwed. Now, when I say that, I think people get really hung up in like how much we're spending in laptops in year 3. No one cares. That's not going to make or break the business. If we can't get people driving these cars for less than what people are paying for fares, that's all that matters. So when we do these projections, and Ed, if you wouldn't mind flipping back to that projection, what I need to see as a CFO, or in this case, an investor, is what line items in this P&L, in this forecast, are the make or break components. And let's just talk about that. What are your thoughts, Ed?
That's where I am going to give this slide its flowers here, because it is hitting on generally the important stuff, customer acquisition costs and the sections or the information that's achieved in there. It's not saying this is going to be our insurance and this is what our ping pong tables cost, et cetera.
Right.
It's got the main stuff in there, like cost of goods sold. Let's break this down and not muddy up with the slide. When we're looking at decks, there are 3 main key metrics that I always look for. One, do you know the lifetime value of your customer? Like, have you thought about, is it battle tested, basically what you're charging? And that's what this deck is missing. We glossed over it. It's missing the business model. I don't know how they're charging, how they're making money.
Fair.
The other thing is I want to know customer acquisition costs, like how much, if you've got that data, et cetera. And then I want to know cost of goods sold. If you give me any type of confidence that you have thought through those 3 main metrics, then I'm going to give you a lot more credit as a founder.
You bet. And one of the lessons I learned long ago is you don't have to know the exact answer. You just have to be able to say, these are the most important parts of our business, and this is what we're testing. All fundraising is for testing. All fundraising is for testing, because you just started 5 seconds ago. You have no idea what these actual numbers will be. But investors will understand that we're putting money toward learning our acquisition costs, learning our cost of goods sold, et cetera. So you don't have to have the exact numbers, the values right, but you definitely have to have the categories right.
So then, Will, what would you tell this founder to do just to improve this slide?
In this case, what I would say is, like, we've got technology costs. I think that's the wrong category to focus on. I would basically say our focal point when we raise money is going to be toward driving spend per customer, and by way of that, spend per customer is LTV, and marketing CPA to these targets. Like that allows me as the investor to say, oh, okay, let's have that conversation about that. And I always say this, if those numbers line up, the rest of the numbers don't matter. Those numbers line up, the rest of the numbers don't matter.
Perfect. I'll make sure that the founder gets this information. All right, Will, that's it. There's a contact slide on the end as we're talking about. Overall, Will, I would say I'd love to know your thoughts. I'm really bullish on this startup because traction, they built something that works, technical team, and they've got a gap that they're looking for, a very unique value proposition. It's just not communicated properly in this deck, but a lot of great stuff to work with. Overall, what are your thoughts so far?
Deck gets a B- for me. Okay. They did do some of the slides well. They maintain the structure. You know, we have a fairly focused structure that we use, our own diet plan, if you will, for how pitch deck should work. And when people follow it, it always works. It always produces a better pitch deck. So my B- isn't a knock on the business. It has nothing to do with the business. It's, Ed, you told me this business is something special. I didn't see it in the deck. I didn't see it in the deck. I saw it in the founders. I saw it in the structure, but I didn't feel any magic from what the product itself is.
And that's what can be so frustrating working with these great founders. We have amazing founders here at Startups.com, is the internal reality of the startup and the external perception that comes through the pitch deck. There's such a gap sometimes in between that. And that's what we want to help you with. Will, that's it for us, our time. I got people in the audience, and I know you're working on your pitch decks, and we've got founders in the audience right now that I'm bullish on as well that you've been working with. So I want to say thank you for everyone checking it out. Do the YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe. Will, what's the last word for you? And then we're going to conclude our session today.
Don't do this alone. You've got like me, you've got Ed, got a whole team of people over here, a whole community of people, other founders, not just us, that can help you with this. If you're going through this pitch deck process, let us help you. That's what we're here for. Tune in on the channel, but drop by the site, talk to us, ask us, hey, here's my pitch deck. Here's where I'm stuck. Make me unstuck. That's our job.
Pitch decks every Tuesday. We got more things coming up. It's going to be absolutely exciting. Once again, thanks for checking it out. Will, pleasure as always. See you next time.
Awesome, Ed. Thanks, buddy.